Good day everyone, and welcome to the channel. It's London Onion here with another Back 4 Blood character build. And the character we'll be building in this video is... Mom. Now, I generally would say cleaners fall on a spectrum of roles or categories ranging from offensive, supportive, and defensive, and of course the degrees in between as we will uncover throughout the series. Just for consistency, I will define offensive roles and perks as abilities that are directly intended to increase damage or bolster offensive capabilities. Defensive roles and perks will be defined as abilities that directly increase survivability from punishment. Lastly, supportive roles and perks are defined as alternative skills that can be instrumentally used for offensive or defensive purposes without a defined intention for either polarization, but are ultimately a helpful perk for one's team. First, we will have a brief overview of our chosen cleaner, go through relevant cards that will either synergize or compensate with their attributes, and conclude with what I consider to be the main tactics to maximize the use of their abilities, as well as my closing statements. Now, for those who were present during our weapon reviews and deck builds, each weapon-centered deck build came with cleaner designations. Our format with character builds will be similar, but with more priority to a given character and maximizing their role on a given team. So starting off with the character attributes of Mom. Mom grants her team 25 temporary health units when a cleaner becomes incapacitated. She has 1 additional support inventory, and her team effect is twofold. She increases her team's revive speed by 100% and decreases temporary health decay by 20%. Now, in regards to our spectrum, it is the attributes that we will use to designate each cleaner. In Mom's case, her temporary health upon incapacitation I will classify as a defensive perk. Her additional support inventory I will naturally classify as a supportive perk. Her increased team revive speed I will also classify as a support perk. And her decreased temporary health decay I will classify as a defensive perk. With 2 defensive and 2 supportive perks, Mom is directly in between our support and defense categories. However, for simplicity, I would say Mom fits more of a supportive defense role, since her defensive perks are conditional rather than continuous. Now, in regards to card selection, we can compensate with the more offensive cards and we can synergize with more related and compounding cards, depending on needs. And naturally, there is the option of creating a mixture or specialization. But if you ask me, a quintessential cleaner is not one that is good at everything, but one that fulfills the role in the best manner to aid the overall effectiveness of their team. So starting ourselves off with her deck build, it is important to state that our selections will mainly be geared to her strengths, with some attention being paid to areas of need. However, like Holly, for those of you who were present last time, we have similar but differently oriented builds depending on weapon choice, as I would argue there are 2 alternative builds that I would use for Mom, which we will explore later on. Additionally, just like our weapon-centered builds, I prefer to use my own designations for cards as opposed to what Back 4 Blood has them labeled as. Initially, I will start off with the more compensating cards and then gradually transition into more synergistic / related and compounding cards. Ever since our recent update, the sequencing of cards no longer has any bearing, but simply for the purpose of organization, I will maintain this format throughout our selections. Now, Mom's character makeup is pretty much a team's supportive hub, a selfless cornucopia with passive goodies that are meant to give her team a series of quick advantages. Ever since a recent update, Mom could be considered a general supportive character. She otherwise would have been considered an alternative healer. But this is not to say that her role is less valuable. With that said, she does not have any directly offensive perks. In regards to her ideal weapon of choice, for those who were present during our weapon reviews and deck builds, I classified Mom as a backbone for a given team, and the weapon I consider best for such a role would be LMGs. At the same time, her default secondary, the Belgian, is a viable option for specialization, but this will be covered later in our discussion. Now, our first deck build will have a slight orientation toward wielding an LMG, but will still prioritize her attributes to best amplify her role. So our first card will be Shredder, which increases damage by 1% for every landed shot and stacks 15 times, provided rounds connect within 3 seconds of each other. Next, Tactical Vest increases damage for assault rifles and LMGs by 10%, and rifle ammo capacity by 30%. Down in Front eliminates both given and received friendly fire while crouched, and increases health by 10 units. This card can apply to one in a leader position, or any other subsequent position, but the rationale behind this card will make more sense later in the discussion. Continuing on, Meat Grinder grants a 30% increase in move speed and accuracy while crouched and using an LMG. Transitioning onto the more related cards, our first one is Rousing Speech, which allows revived teammates to heal for an additional 10 units, increase team revive speed by 50%, and reduce incapacitation trauma by 10%. Following, we have Pumped Up for a 20% increase in temporary health decay, one additional pain med that spawns in each map, and an increase in health by 5%. Antibiotic Ointment increases healing efficiency by 25% upon using a medical accessory, and allows a given target to heal for an additional 10 temporary health. Next, Inspiring Sacrifice grants 20 units of health over 15 seconds for one's team upon a cleaner becoming incapacitated. Compounding with this card, I have Combat Medic, which increases use speed by 50% and grants 20 health units to a revived cleaner. Our remaining cards will be oriented toward augmenting Mom's temporary health perks. First, we have Fit as a Fiddle for 20% team bolstered health, which is simply temporary health beyond one's base health capacity and increases health by 5 units. Well Rested grants team overheal by 20% and team healing efficiency by 5%. Next up, I employed Support Scavenger, which increases the spawn rate of support accessories, aiding Mom as well as her team in remaining topped off for healing items. Numb increases damage resistance by 10% while one has temporary health. Fanny Pack grants an additional support inventory slot and increases trauma resistance by 15%. And lastly, Group Therapy grants 8 health units to the entire cleaner team upon using a medical accessory. Overall, this brings Mom's total damage output to an additional 25%, provided that Shredder is maximized. Her team revive speed will increase by 150%, and revive teammates with an additional 30 health plus 25 temporary health. Temporary health decay will decrease by 40%, healing efficiency will increase by 30%, and she will be able to carry 3 support items. Now, our alternative build will give more favor to the Belgian. This change in weapon priority doesn't really alter our other card choices. We will simply be swapping out the LMG-based cards for shotgun-based ones. Meat Grinder, Down in Front, and Tactical Vest will be swapped out for Scattergun Skills, Buckshot Bruiser, and Shell Carrier. Scattergun Skills increases reload speed for shotguns by 40%. Buckshot Bruiser grants a quarter of a temporary health unit for every shotgun pellet that lands, and Shell Carrier increases damage with shotguns by 10% and shell capacity by 30%. Now, in all honesty, ever since Mom's change in perks, she was a bit more difficult to put into a distinctive role. She is selfless, but also not exactly a team medic, though her base perks can lead her in that direction. I think these are just one of many different builds she can fit nicely into. But anyway, with all of these skills in mind, I would argue that Mom is best suited for the Miner role, which is meant to be a team supportive role, and her focus is ultimately meant to be, well, everywhere. The team supporter is the most well-protected role, but also intended to be the most generous while limiting their offensive capability and reserving such tactics for the Alpha and Major. Now, in the event of chaos, or the need for extra firepower, that is where the Miner will come in and assist in either direction. This is also why I would equip Mom with an LMG and the relevant cards. Although down in front would imply use for an alpha, I would argue that this card can also work for those in subsequent positions. As long as they are crouched, they are not a hazard to their team, and an LMG's main purpose is a suppressive, lengthy base of fire in support of one's team. Naturally, they are high in ammo consumption, which is why I would not equip it to an alpha. As a minor, there is likely much less to fire at. As for the Belgian-oriented alternative, this creates more of a close-range type of shooter, which will stifle any proclivity for long-range shooting and reduce the odds of friendly fire. As third ranked, two other cleaners in front only create more hazards to try and avoid. At least with the Belgian, firing should only take place up close and reserve the primary for emergencies and hordes. Now in regards to Mom's build and personal tactics, although she is not exactly built for being your traditional combat medic, she can still fulfill this role in her own way. Mom is more oriented to faster, though less damage/trauma resistant means of keeping her team on their feet with temporary health as her main tool. This really takes its niche in high velocity circumstances that leave very little time for proper healing. Metaphorically speaking, if your stereotypical combat medic is a hammer, nails, and 2x4s, then Mom is glue and duct tape. Both have their place, they just work better for different circumstances. It's the miner that seeks out the nooks and crannies so as to locate useful items, while the rest deal with incoming ridden. From what I can gather, Mom's base attributes don't really put her in a combat role, but instead does everything to keep others in their role. She can be likened to a Cantus from Gears of War 3, Ajax from Disney's Eternals, or perhaps those pesky Promethean Watchers from Halo 4. When it comes time to healing, her efficiency is the main advantage, but with a little less permanence. Now everything in this discussion can be taken with a grain of salt, as deck build combinations are too complex for me to fairly evaluate them. However, this is the build I prefer to use when playing on the Nightmare difficulty with Mom. Now it is paramount to state that team maturity is ultimately what makes any deck work. And for those who were present during our last cleaner discussion, I'm using maturity as an umbrella term to describe each individual's general understanding of roles, navigation, character and weapon attributes, ridden/mutation deterrent tactics, resource management, and ultimately collaboration, as this is a team-based game. I would also argue that the greater one's team maturity is, the greater efficacy specializations, like the one we just went through, will have, as each person will have a greater understanding of what it means to operate as a unit without being overbearing. Carrying on, less maturity will likely demand more of a compensating build so as to provide support where there are more deficiencies. However, there is far more to compensate with than there is to specialize with, and would create an unnecessarily long discussion. Now, Mom is only one piece of this giant cleaner pie, but that brings us to the end of our discussion today. Thank you guys for joining me on this one, and in our next video, the cleaner of discussion will be Doc, and we will determine where she sits on our spectrum of roles. It's been London Onion, and I will see you guys next time.